good morning and welcome to you all. Most of you might be frequent flyers of these webinars, but for the ones who do not know us, Page Executive in a couple of lines is the executive search arm of Page Group, known by our flagship brand, Michael Page, a network of 190 consultants spread around the 5 continents. These webinars are organized for the last 4 years and allow us to connect with you. Always a good immersion into exceptional career path like today, and discuss latest market trends as well. We're happy to welcome Bertrand Gacon as our special guest for the third and last webinar of 2021 on the continuous theme of courageous leadership. Welcome, Bertrand.
Hello. Hi, everyone.
We'll be trying with Bertrand and Julia to answer, and with you, the question of how can you make an impact as a successful leader? In a few lines, Bertrand is the co-founder and CEO of Impact, a collaborative platform that uses collective intelligence to produce ratings and scores that identify the true impact companies are having on the world. Bertrand will be taking the lead in a minute, explaining his 20+ years of career that led to Impact, its ideology, technology, and innovative business model. I shall have politely started with you, Julia Binder, who generously accepted to join us as well. Julia is a professor of sustainable innovation and business transformation at IMD in Lausanne, Switzerland, who will be moderating the session alongside with me. Julia enjoys exploring the process, strategy, and mechanism that allows entrepreneurs to combine economical, social, and environmental impact, initiating a potential transformation of their business. We'll spend an hour together, and at halftime, around 11:35, Julia and I will be moderating your question. We'll welcome all your questions. So please use the chat box that should be at the middle of your screen. We'll be making sure to raise the most, and feel free to put your name or remain anonymous. Welcome again, Julia. Bertrand, the floor is yours, Bertrand.
Hi, hey, thanks a lot, Raphael, for the introduction, and hello, everyone. I'm very honored to be here today and exchange with you on this topic of impact and how all of us can have an impact on the planet. Actually, all of us are having an impact on the planet and society, and it's everybody's business to make sure that this impact is positive. And yeah, maybe as a way of a background, because Raphael asked me to briefly introduce the journey that was mine before I started Impact with my co-founder Sylvain. And I have to say it started almost by accident. I started in the financial industry because just after graduating, I wanted to discover Asia. I graduated in Mexico, actually, and I wanted to discover Asia, which was an area that was really unfamiliar and very fascinating. And so I just went there with the tourist visa, and the first job I could land was in finance. It was not really by choice that I started in finance, but very quickly I realized that, of course, the financial industry has a very influential power and this capacity to change the economy just by deciding what are the sectors, what are the business models that get finance, and what are those that do not get finance. And so very quickly, I just, had this idea of how can we turn that influential power into a force for good. And I think the thought that I had at that time behind this is also the thoughts around purpose, which now is something which has become a lot more popular. And I think this is a very good thing. Yeah, we're all spending 50 hours or plus every week, doing our job and working. And there's all the intellectual rewards about that, all the challenges. But what if, all of these hours that we spend could also be used to make the world a better place? And so this kind of purpose was something I was really I was looking for from the very early days of my career. And it took me a couple of years, even more than that, before I can actually make it a reality. But I know this series is a lot about entrepreneurship, and at that time was more about intrapreneurship. So how do you create within your organization this kind of change, of transformation that you want to see, and how do you change organization from the inside? After a number of years where I worked on a more, I would say, conventional projects in the financial industry, I finally got the chance to really create from scratch the sustainable investment offering of BNP Paribas. That was more than 15 years ago. And it was really out of personal conviction. So it was something that did not exist at that time. It was something that was not on the agenda. It was not a demand from the management for me to do that. It was really my own pet project in a way, my own decision to say we should really do something about that. I just finished a pretty complicated project successfully for the bank, and then I was in good position to knock at the door of the management and say, okay, now it's time for me to do something different, and this is how it started. I mean, I was given the chance to start something from scratch. At the beginning, it was just me, so of course it was not a huge investment that I was asking for the bank, and that's probably also one of the lessons that we might want to discuss a bit further on. Is how do you get started, and it's possible to get started in a very practical way and do small steps. And so it started with that, and very quickly we developed an offering with always the same idea that sustainability shouldn't be considered as a burden for business. Actually, it should actually be done in the exact opposite. It should be a way of improving business performance. It should be organized as a way of reducing costs, improving profits. We should really, if we want that to happen, if we want to change the world, we should really reconcile business with sustainability and not, oppose those two dimensions. And that was really a common thread in everything that I've done since then. I then moved to different banks to further develop and lead and expand that. I really wanted to make sure that the early stage where we worked in kind of silos, where your role was to develop a few products, outside of the conventional offering, just like some car makers do today. They have their clean car type of model within a much broader range of conventional cars. That was the early days where sustainable finance was a kind of silo, isolated offering. But then very quickly we realized that sustainability is not a product. Sustainability is something that goes across the board. And so my next challenge was really to make sure that we can completely transform the entire bank. Every investment that is made by the bank should be integrating that sustainability dimension. And that's a much more complicated challenge, because then you have to really transform the core business. You have to change the processes, you have to change the products, you have to change the skills. And it's completely different level in terms of conduct of change management, in terms of the level of the strategic level of discussion that you need to have with the management. But this is what I think we also were able to do with the team, and transforming a bank such as Lombard Odier, which was already, was not starting from scratch there. But I think what we were successful doing is really making sustainability the core of the business of Lombard Odier, and not just again a satellite offering. So, and my last ambition, which I also drove when I was there, was really to make sure that it does not only sustainability is not just a product discussion, but that the whole organization is also being transformed. And this is why I also wanted to make sure that Lombard Odier would engage into the B Corp certification, which the bank successfully got just at the beginning of 2019, and that was the last objective that I had assigned to myself before I would move to my next project. And that next project was really the entrepreneur type of journey, which started in 2019. And it started just like very often, it started out of a frustration. It's when you see something that is not working properly that you come up with a new idea of doing things differently. And yeah, that was again the case with Impact. So as a head of investment teams, sustainable investment teams, in the last 15 years, for the many funds that we manage, I was always very frustrated with the quality of the data and the research we have at hand when it comes to measuring the impact and the good and the bad that companies have on the planet and society. It's a very complex issue. It's much harder to measure the social and environmental performance of a company than it is to measure its financial performance. One of the reasons, of course, being the lack of data that you have available to do that. It's improving, but it's still not good enough. And so we were buying data from external providers, and most of these data actually were really focusing on what we still call today the CSR performance of companies, and so corporate social responsibility. And you all know about this, and the name says it all. The corporate social responsibility, it's about measuring how responsible is a business, but that is not the most important question. The really important question is not whether the business is responsible, is what is the impact that business is having on the planet and society. You can be a very responsible business, but still have a negative impact, or vice versa. You can be a very irresponsible business, but still manage to have a positive impact because your product, for instance, is generating a very positive change. And so the question, slightly move away from just trying to assess whether a company is responsible to really assess what is the net value that these companies are bringing to the planet and society. And this is really what we need to measure, us as investors, when we make decision to support some companies or support some sectors or business models. The real and only question that matters is really the question of impact, not the question of responsibility. And no tools existed at that time to do that. And this is where we wanted to position the company that I created with my co-founder, Sylvain Massot. And very quickly, we realized that that was a very ambitious task. Again, because, measuring the many forms that a company such as Google or Nestle is having on the planet of society is very complex. Every company has some positive impact. They all create jobs, for instance. They all pay taxes. A company such as Nestle contributes to feeding the planet, but they also have negative impacts. They create pollution, plastic pollution, for instance, for Nestle, or CO2 emissions. And so the real hard part is to be able to document each of those major impacts and be able to weight them one against the other so that you can finally determine what is the net contribution of companies to the world. And that requires a huge brain power, This, to us, the very first conclusion that we had is that the single expert model, which is so predominant in the financial industry, is completely not appropriate to do impact measurement. You cannot ask one single person to tell you about the impact of Google. It has so many dimensions and so many implications that it's not possible for one single human brain to grasp that complexity. So the dominant model was not qualified. We need to move to something new. And that huge brain power today can only come from two different sources. The first one is really artificial intelligence, because then you can just add up computational power in a way. But when we try this solution, we quickly realize that because the data available on the impact of companies is not standardized, is not centralized, it's a jungle really. Then of course, hoping that a very nice, smart algorithm would just take this very inconsistent data and turn that into meaningful scores is a long shot really. And we tried this out. We were really not convinced by the results. I know that some other people are doing this today, but as of now, I don't think that's the right approach. Not because the technology is not mature enough. The technology is really already good to do that. But again, because the data you have available doesn't allow for these processes to work efficiently. So we move to the next other big options of getting that huge brain power, and that's collective intelligence. Is that capacity of bringing together tens of thousands of people collaborating in an organized way to collectively document, collect, clean up all the data and then assess this impact one by one in a way which is much less subjective than the one given by one single expert, because instead of asking just Bertrand what he thinks about the impact of Nestlé, you ask 50,000 people what they do think about that based on actual verified information and facts. And this is what we did for the last 2 years. We built that community, we built that platform, which is now highly successful, fully operational, and really with the objective of making that information available to all citizens. This is really the mission that we have. Impact is not just for investors. Impact measurement should be for every citizen to be aware when they buy from a product, from a company, when they work for a company, when they invest in a company. All of us should be, familiar with the type of impact that these companies are having on the planet and society. And so that democratization, that commoditization of impact data is also a large part of our mission. This is why the platform is available to everyone for free. All of us, can go there and not only read that research, get access to the scores, but also do your part and make yourself heard in terms of contributing to the collective assessments of these impacts. So in a nutshell, this is what we have been to. In the last 2 years, we were able to completely establish the model. We now have a community of 40,000 people active on the platform. We have developed a certification program which makes sure that the people that are doing the research are qualified to do that. So 100,000 people have actually attending that training, and 500 of them have become certified impact analysts, which is already the largest community in the world of impact analysts, and they operate on the platform. Everything is digitalized. They will find the topics to write about. They will have 15 days to reserve, and then it's being verified, published on the platform, and made accessible to everyone. So that the process. And the last 2 years, we were able to raise 5 million euros in terms of seed money. So the life of an entrepreneur is not just developing a product, is also a lot to do with fundraising, particularly for a business model like ours, where there's a pretty huge initial upfront cost investment, to consider. The main reason for that, and I should have started with that, is the business model is really to sell the data to the financial industry. And you're not relevant to the financial industry until you have covered at least 1,000, 2,000 companies. And that's a lot of research to be produced before you can actually sell it. And so it does require pretty significant upfront investments before you actually can get to the commercial stage. But we're there now, and we've already signed our first client. Another one just signed yesterday, a big one. So a bit too early to give the name because the contract has not been received yet. But it looks like we are meaningful to the market, and it's the best reward we really receive every day is not clients signing new contract, is really the community feedback that we receive. We see the enthusiasm of people joining the platform, people willing to take a concrete action, this idea of working together, collaborating on the same objective in a way that is mission aligned. That is really something which is very rewarding for all the team. So that's it. I don't want to be too long about that. I hope it was not a long monologue, and I will raise many more questions. I think at this stage, I would just hand it over back to you, Raphael and Julia.
No, great for the introduction. I'll actually pass it on to Julia, who's boiling with questions.
Indeed, it's cooking inside. Bertrand, thank you so much for this really interesting story about your journey from an intrapreneur to an entrepreneur. And I think this is also what I wanted to start off. As a moderator, you're in this privileged position to ask your burning questions first before we take all the other questions that we're slowly receiving over the chat. And I encourage everyone to send all their questions. Bertrand, what I find particularly interesting is that you started your journey as a, let's say, change agent, which you are, intrapreneurial. So you started with changing with banks, which are completely different challenges than when you start something from scratch. And you mentioned that oftentimes the most difficult step, and this is something that we see with our executives as well, So it's not the awareness. The awareness for sustainability is nowadays there. That is maybe different from 10 years ago. So people are aware that they need to change. The most difficult thing is, how do we actually get started? And I would be curious from your perspective, particularly maybe from your experience within the banks, how do you kick off these projects? How do you even make sense of this broad topic of sustainability and determine and prioritize where do we want to put our energy first? And yeah, how do we get our head around this very big and often complex notion of sustainability?
Yeah, and that's a tricky part, because one of the first, probably move that the banks is doing is trying to make a very broad assessments and go for a strategic plan and a 5-year plan, and then it goes lost into the details. And my recommendation there that is really fewer is better. You really need to identify, not 20 different projects, small projects like most of the time insignificant projects like, replacing your cups with mugs and stuff like this. With that, at the end of the day, is really nice. I mean, I'm not saying that you should not do that, but it's not where this is not what is going to drive the agenda. You need to have 1, 2, maximum 3 big initiatives that are very practical. People need to see result. People need to see action, and stick to those 3 ones. And just get them done before you can move to the next one, and then further expand and then further structured. The big risk is really to get lost into discussions, into meaningless type of actions. And not only fewer is better, but probably also you need to go as quickly as you can to business related type of topics. And here again, it's a bit counterintuitive, because at the beginning, when the organization is not very mature, the temptation is really to go for all of these nice actions that actually are a bit peripheral to the core business, just precisely because then, it's much easier. You don't have to rethink your core business. Then changing your cafeteria or changing your caps it's a no-brainer. But this is not what is going to drive the change at the end of the day. If you really want to be serious about that, you need to go where the core business is. And for that to happen, you probably need to focus on those types of initiatives where sustainability will not be a burden to your core business, but would be quite the other way around, would be a booster to your business. And yeah, that would be my recommendation. Go there and stick to that when you start.
And I think you said it very nicely before. You said at the beginning, there's a lot of these satellite offers where we want to achieve these quick wins and quick gains when it comes to sustainability, often very visibly as well. How can we make sure that we're addressing the right topics? What we've been seeing a lot is now that materiality analysis become more and more important to get a better understanding. Before that, we had the life cycle assessments to really get an understanding of what are really the pressing topics when we look at our own company. Is this something that you would recommend, or what would be your suggestion to really not start, let's say, almost focusing on the wrong topics?
No, again, I would really recommend to go right away to the core business type of related activities. They're not the easiest, because this is where you will find the headwinds, definitely. And when this happens, you know that you're at the right place. But then the solution is to go for these core business topics, but find the ones, again, that can be perceived not as additional cost or burdens or impediment to business as usual, to business development, but really as something that can either significantly reduce some costs, improve efficiency, or just even allow for product innovation. And when you get there, then you're having the right type of discussion with the right group of people. Otherwise, you might just find yourself again talking about very anecdotal issues that it would be much easier to do, because it's just a matter of taking some I would say painless measures for the business. But this is not what matters. And if you want to be where it matters, then you need to go where the resistance is high, and there you know that you are at the right place. If you don't find any resistance, or if the resistance is not big, it's probably that you're wasting your time on some actions that are not really worth the efforts. You should be begging for resistance, and then once this resistance is there, then you know that you are at the right place. Now the next stage again is to see how you can come up with a solution or a proposal that actually is going to get the buy-in from the management, because even though it is sensitive, it is touching the core business, it also gets this idea of additional value, either for the product offering or for the P&L. And this is the really ideal place to start.
You mentioned something very important here. This is the stakeholder buy-in, right? And in particular, when we talk about companies, there is this board level, there's management, oftentimes difficult. And you mentioned that in an ideal world, we would all see that sustainability actually helps to ensure a good and thriving business. Now, in a less ideal world, we are all pressured to achieve good numbers by the end of the year. So this long-term perspective, where sustainability often pays off in a medium to long term, is sometimes not as apparent. How do you get this kind of topic up to the board level? So, and do you need it, right? Do you need the top-down approach to implement these changes? Or is there something that you can do bottom up to start get things off the ground?
Yeah, you definitely need both. I mean, most of the or at least it was the case 15 years ago. Maybe now it's a bit different because the sustainability is already pretty high on the agenda of many board meetings, many executive teams. But definitely having some champions that can also do the groundwork is a very important key success factor. In the other way around, if these discussions don't reach the board, then again, you're not at the right place. They need to be there. So the top down need to happen in one way or the other, even if it's not the easy path. It needs to be there. This is the kind of discussion you want your executive team to have, not just once, but on a regular basis. So sustainability should be part of one of the recurring point that is discussed at the board meeting level on a regular basis. Mm-hmm. Yes. Definitely, if you want to this discussion to be there, you should go for maybe product innovation. Product innovation is one of the most interesting ways where you can demonstrate that, okay, don't change anything yet to the core business, but what about launching this new product, this new service, which is providing that very material positive change to the planet and society, either an environmental change or a social change, something that you can actually demonstrate. Mm-hmm. And get started with that, because a new product is a new revenue stream for a company. And that's something which is much easier to sell to the management than something which will be perceived as a risk of reducing the business development capacity.
Very, very interesting. I think we can continue to talk about this, how to actually implement it within a business for many hours. We have some interesting questions that relate more closely to your business model. And I think Image brought this up, and she said she's very impressed by what you have achieved, and I think we all are. And what she's saying is whether the impact of ethical behavior could also be potentially added to the measurement of the company's impact. And so the question, is this something you're already thinking around, or this is already covered, or is this something that an interesting way to extend your business model?
Yeah, actually, this is something that we closely looked at and decided not to go for that. And I think this is sometimes a bit hard for even members in our community. It requires some form of education about that. But there's a very clear distinction between ethics and impact. Mm-hmm. And ethic is absolutely, I mean, it's essential for any company, but this is not our business. We do not measure how ethical is the company or how ethical is the board or the decisions that are being made. We, at the end of the day, only measure the material impact. And again, sometimes you can have a very ethical company, which is, really doing all the good things, being well-intentioned, but for some reason that was beyond their control, they still ended up having a negative impact on health or on the environment, or one of their plants got, was involved in a heavy pollution of the environment. And so measuring the ethics is something that some other people do. And we encourage that, people look at the ethics scoring of companies, but our core business is really impact measurement. And we stick to that. So, and it's not always so easy because, for some companies, particularly if you look at I don't know, for instance, the pharmaceutical companies or some companies can be very ethical question may be very sensitive. Well, we kind of exonerate ourselves from these debate and this question by just sticking to the facts. You know, how many people got cured, how many people got negative side effects, how many tons of CO2 were produced while producing these drugs. Did they pollute rivers? And we measure that, we quantify that with hard facts and data. Whether the management was ethical, whether they were having, you know, bad or good behaviors, is only taken into consideration when these good or bad behaviors do result into an impact. So of course, if a very bad, you know, a company which has a poor ethics ends up generating negative consequences for communities, for instance, then this would be documented, but not the ethical part itself. The consequences would be documented, and only the consequences.
I fully understand that you need to focus, and nevertheless, I find this a very interesting kind of oftentimes discrepancy, in the sense that if we look at, for instance, Tesla, which are very vocal about their external positive impact, if we like, and then we get notes about how they're treating their employees not very well. So I find this interesting that we nowadays see also this kind of different way where we are externally, we're having a positive impact, or at least as much as we can, but internally then we're not behaving to the highest standard that is possible. So I'm wondering, I mean, from a holistic impact perspective, I still believe this internal perspective should be covered somehow, even if not by your company. It should be covered in an overall sustainability report, nevertheless, to reconcile these two different worlds. Yeah,
so maybe I was not clear enough, but we do cover but we do cover the outcomes of these policies, and not the policies themselves, not the behaviors, but the results of these behaviors. Yeah. So it's not like we ignore those behaviors altogether. We do focus on that. And we do document actually all of these impacts. So in the case of Tesla, one analysis would be documented maybe, I don't know, the good consequences electric cars have on air pollution, particularly in the cities. But we also document, you know, the way they treat their employees, the way they extract the lithium, for instance, the pollution that is being generated there. All of that will be documented one by one. But this is not what is really the added value of what we do. I mean, it is already, because it's quite complex to document all of that, and this is also where having, you know, 40,000 people doing that is a big plus. But where the big added value comes is when you start trying to basically calculate a net score for Tesla. You know, is it really? How do you weight all the good things they do compared to all the bad things they do? And at the end of the day, is Tesla end up being a positive company for the planet and society? Should we still keep Tesla, or should we, you know, realize that at the end of the day, it is not worth it, because for the good they do here, you know, there's so much bad that they do elsewhere, which at the end of the day means that the net impact is not interesting. And we do that for every single company in the universe. Today we cover 1,500 companies, and you'd be surprised to see that actually we've got about, I think today it's about 52% of those companies that end up in the negative score. So when you actually weight all of their negative and positive one, weighted by the community, again, not weighted by our own proprietary methodology, it's completely open and transparent, then you realize that more than one company out of two ends up having a negative score on the planet and society. And of course, for the environmental dimension, that's probably the case for every single company in the world. There's very few companies who are environmentally positive. They would have to, you know, create their core products needs to generate positive environmental impact. But most of the companies, when it comes at the environment, they either generate pollution or extract resources, and both activities are actually detrimental to the environment. So the I would say the normal way for a business today is to reduce as much as they can their negative environmental impact, but it's very hard for them to become environmentally positive. So most of the positive impact they have is not related to environmental issue. Most of the time it's related to some of the benefits that they bring to the society through their product and services, like, I don't know, increased productivity, mobility, like Tesla would be mobility, you know, or in some cases, improve health condition by reducing air pollution. But then again, the real added value of the collaborative approach is to be able to weight each of that and say, is the contribution of Tesla to air pollution so much bigger than than all the harm they do when they treat their employees in not such a ethical way? And this is what we'll be capturing.
And I find this collective approach very, very interesting. And maybe I would be very interested also, how do you mobilize kind of the community for that? And how do you incentivize that they really do their work properly? And maybe this is a question. And then the B question would be, because we get some traction on what you've just explained on the Q&A as well. And there's the question, when you say this net positive at the end, or this net sum at the end, how do you quantify and sum up inherently different, sometimes even incomparable types of impact? How do you do this weighting that you're mentioning in your methodology?
Yeah, so to come back to your first question on incentivization, we basically have two segments in our community. They're what we call the analysts. So there's the 500 people that went through that certification program that I mentioned before, and these persons are being paid for their work. So it's a hard work to go look for all the data. They're all passionate. So that's the common, I think that's the common thread for all the community members. They're all passionate about sustainability. Most of them, they also have their educational background in environmental science or engineering or topics that are related to the issues that they cover. And those people have to book some topics, write about, do the academic research. And when they submit that to the reviewing team, if they actually have the right level of quality, then it's being published on the platform, and at that time they're being paid for their work. So that's a very clear incentive, which is partially financial, but also partially I would say social recognition of their expertise and their work on the platform. For the other segment, so the much wider, much broader community of 40,000 people reading this analysis, reading all these facts and figures, and rating, assessing how big is the scale of this impact. So today, these people, they're really incentivized only through their interest into the topics. So we have a number of algorithms that are actually detecting any suspicious rating patterns. But most of those people, actually, they really come here because they want to learn, they want to contribute, and they want to have their voice heard, basically. So that was for the incentivization. We're actually working now on new forms of incentivization, in particular, the gamification of the platform. And for the second question, it's a question that comes back very often. You know, at the end of the day, you're measuring pears and apples, and then this is correct. But this is, for me, this is the although imperfect, this is a very much needed part of what we need to do, because at the end of the day, a portfolio manager doesn't decide whether, you know, he or she invests only on you know, this part of Tesla that is doing some good to the planet, or this other part. When he invests in Tesla, he invests in the whole company. And so we need to decide whether we need to give to that portfolio manager the right information on whether, you know, the net positive impact is, I mean, the net contribution of that company is positive or negative. And to do that, we will take each of these impacts individually, and we will ask the community to basically weight the scale of the impact. So we know that pollution is negative, of course, but how negative is it? Is it very negative, slightly positive, extremely negative? And then we will weight the scale of that impact. So you were mentioning, for instance, that Tesla might not have a very good score when it comes at treating their own employees, but how many employees actually work at Tesla? You know, so maybe it's a community, I don't know how many employees work there, but let's say maybe 50,000 people. So 50,000 people will actually suffer from not ideal job conditions, for instance. How do you compare that to, I don't know, maybe the millions of people driving a car and making that the air pollution is reducing? And that is the question, you know, at the end of the day, maybe Tesla, as assessed by the community, when it goes to air pollution, they would have a positive score with a large scale. And when it comes to treating their employee, they would have a very negative score, but with a lower scale. And then when we will just aggregate that to form the ultimate score, it's just a basic weighted average of all of these dimensions. And if you have more positive impact than negative one, you will still end up in the positive part of the equation. Our scores goes from -5 to +5. But it's a very simple, a very readable and very transparent methodology. You can always very quickly understand why the community has given this score and this weight, and understand how then the consolidated score is being, broken down into different topics.
If I may, in talking about consolidated score, there's a very good question from Michael about any potential, how you control bias from people rating the impact analysis.
So this is mainly due, I will try to make a short answer to that, because it does require many different types of actions, but collective intelligence is a very well documented, from the academic standpoint, it's a very well documented research topic. And we know a lot about collective intelligence mechanism, and we know what is required for this mechanism to work properly. And it's not magical. Collective intelligence is very powerful, but it can be also very dangerous if you don't do it properly. And two of the central dimensions, central conditions that you need for collective intelligence to work efficiently. The first one is what we call independence. And the second one is diversity. So independence means that every member should be able to give their own opinions without being influenced by the rest of the community. This is why you don't get to see the scores given by the rest of the community when you do your own ratings on the platform. And the second one is diversity, and that the biggest way of protecting against types of biases and manipulation. Actually, everybody has biases. We all have our own biases, but it doesn't matter as long as you've got a diverse group of people, because my biases are going to be different from yours, Raphael, or from yours, Julia. And at the end of the day, there will be a mechanisms of, I would say, compensation, which will mean that, brought together, we will reach a kind of average. But that can only work, of course, if the participants come from very different backgrounds. If all the participants are white males above 50 years old based in Geneva, then you don't get the kind of diversity that is needed for those biases to be self-compensated. So we work a lot on establishing the diversity of the raters. That is the work we do upfront. And then, at the end of the process, we worked with basically AI technology to detect all that we call suspicious rating patterns. So there may be many different types of suspicious rating patterns. Some of them would be attempt to manipulate the scores. So those ones are very quickly detected, because if you want to have any meaningful result, you need to get volume. And as soon as you get volume, then you get detected. Then there's also the lazy raters. So the one that, we know that they haven't really thought before they rate. They just clicked very lazily on some ratings, so that we can detect them also very easily. How much time did they spend reading the analysis before they rate, for instance. And there's a number of other cases that we can detect in through our algorithm, basically, and we then remove those ratings.
And sorry to cut you, your community of assessors, raters are worldwide?
They are worldwide today, yes. Actually, we have a slight bias towards emerging markets. And another slight bias is also because we have been more active into English-speaking countries, just because the platform is the main language is English, which means that, of course, English-speaking participants are overrepresented on the platform. So it's not entirely completely, a statistically, a valid panel representing the world population. But it's actually very diverse in terms of gender. We've got 51% of women and 49% of men. It's very diverse in terms of age groups. Surprisingly, we thought that the young generation would be largely overrepresented. It is slightly overrepresented, but we really get people from every age groups. And in terms of geographies, it is more people coming from emerging market than developed worlds, but we still, of course, have many participants in Europe, in North America as well. We're very proud to have participants. I think we have participants in 120 countries now, including Mongolia and Peru and the Philippines and Kenya. And so, yeah, it's pretty diverse.
Bertrand, there's a lot of interest in Impact's business model and the methodology, but there's also a lot of interest in your leadership journey, which is equally interesting. And there is a question which kind of takes us back to your time at, and I think it was Lombard-Odier, exactly. And there the question is, could you describe the process and difficulties you faced for implementing the B Corp certification in Lombard-Odier? And did it really change something for the company?
That would be a question for them, I would say, to answer. But on the first one, I have to say that this was a perfect example of why at one point in time you need champions, because this is something that I try myself. I was responsible of the investment side. So it was not my job to, B Corp certification is really very much about the corporate sustainability part, not just the product and services. But I kept having clients, complaining that, they would also need to see that Lombard-Odier itself as a company was also aligned with the type of investment we were promoting. And so, I kept asking for someone to take charge of that. And then at the end of the day, I was not very effective in that kind of discussion. And so I decided that we will do it ourselves, right? And I did it the first time a long time ago, probably 6 to 7 years ago. And we realized, so the benefit with the easy thing with the B Corp certification is that you can do a self-assessment, which is free for those of you who know the B Corp certification process. And so you can answer a questionnaire, and that will give you, a rough estimates of how many points you're able to get. And if you're above 80, then it means that you can give it a try and go to the B Corp team, and they will review your questionnaire. And if they really agree with your 80 points, then you become certified. So when we did that the first time, we didn't get there. We only had like 70 points maybe. And I was very frustrated because a large part of the point we didn't get was precisely related to our core product and services. And the B Corp certification at that time was really only about your policies and your practices, was about your operations, but not your core business. And so I turned to the team at B Corp in New York, and I say, a large part of the point that you're actually giving out should be related to your product and services, because it's not the same thing if you're selling cigarettes or if you're selling impact investing fund, for instance. And they, to my surprise, they listened to us, and they actually changed the questionnaire. And so 3 years after, we gave it another try, and this time we had a much higher score. And actually, I didn't ask for permission internally to go for the B Corp certification. I used the fait accompli type of strategy where we did that. We did all the hard work, and then we turned to the management and say, guys, we did that, and we ended up having a 100 points. So the B Corp certification is yours if you want it. And even then, it was not a given. Many people were worried in the management team, like, yeah, but do we have string attached? Is this going to lead us, over higher scrutiny? Are we going to be prevented from investing, in the way we want? Does it mean that, some companies won't be investable anymore? And so it raises a lot of concern and doubt, which are perfectly understandable. But yes, it did require someone to basically take leadership, do it, and then kind of force the entire organization to follow through. And this is really the way I felt it was done at Lombard-Odier. At the end of the day, I think they're very happy to be a B Corp certified. There's been many benefits in terms of not just, I would say, employee loyalty or, the kind of also attracting new talents. I could even witness that myself in a number of interviews where I was asked by the young people, whether we were serious about that. And many of them realized, considered that the B Corp certification was a very positive sign. But surprisingly, a lot more quicker than we thought, this also led to positive business results. And I have in mind, in particular, one relationship manager who called me and say that he's been, chasing a client for the last 5 years. We've never been able to get that client, and the day the client learned that Lombard-Odier was a B Corp, he actually closed his account in another bank, and the same week he actually transferred all of the money to Lombard-Odier. So and it was not an isolated case. So this is the proof that sustainability is not just for tree huggers. It's actually a business imperative. If you do it well, it will benefit your business.
And I think you're addressing here question very well already, but he explicitly asked, how was your investment performance, let's say on impact investing, compared to traditional and alternative asset classes at Lombard Odier? And I think you just hinted to it, but maybe to answer this question more explicitly, and I think it's a question that comes up quite frequently, is this: does it pay off to invest in impact, or is this actually something where we need to forego our financial benefits?
This is the question I used to have a long time ago, but not so much in the last 5 years, precisely because since the COP21 and since 2015, this was the year the Paris Agreement, but also the SDGs were born. Most of the market is actually selling poor ESG performers and buying top ESG performers, and the immediate consequences of that is that ESG has been a pretty good investment decision over the last 5 years. Mm-hmm. Probably not always for the good reason, because it's a kind of I would say of self-fulfilling prophecy. People just wanted to avoid some risk, and the price of good ESG companies just improving because many people want to buy them, not because their performance, the sustainability performance is good. But still, it means that it has been a very successful strategy over the last 5 years. Now, of course, there's always this question about is sustainable investment paying off? I would say, just like for any other investment strategy, it really depends a lot of your portfolio manager. It's not because it's a sustainable investment fund that it will automatically overperform. If you have a bad portfolio manager, it can be a good sustainable strategy and it would still underperform. But yes, there's no reason why sustainability will not deliver result. And actually, I am very much convinced that the sustainability revolution is really like the digital revolution. Many people at the beginning don't really understand what it means, don't really understand how profound it is, but it will affect every single business. And if you are missing that train, if you are not actually acting as a business leader on that, you will suffer. That is a very strong conviction. I think sustainability is going to create a lot of winners and a lot of losers in the next 5 years, and you want to be on the right side of the history there.
Indeed, and maybe in the spirit of that, we're reaching the end of our webinar, but and in the light of this idea of courageous leadership, one question that came up here in different ways was also, how do you build up resilience in this fight for being on the right side, right? So how do you address the complexities and trade-offs? Because oftentimes decisions are not as easy and straightforward. So it's not clear to say this is the best way to go. Oftentimes it's you're kind of venturing into gray zones here. And how do you actually continue to push the boundaries as a leader, where do you get the energy from, and don't give up in this rather long journey towards sustainability?
Well, I think passion is really key there. And for all of you attending to that webinar today, if I have only one recommendation, is really be passionate about it. If you're not, just find someone who is to drive that in your organization, because you do need a lot of passion. I mean, it's of course a lot easier today than what it was the case 15 years ago. But at many points in times, I was on the verge of just giving it up because I didn't see the kind of change that I wanted to see. And you start, feeling a bit desperate about, is it really worth the efforts? But it is now. And I think you still need this kind of passion to keep pushing. So yeah, passion is probably a large part of the answer. And you also need agility. You were mentioning that it's not easy. And definitely it is not easy. It is something that it is fairly new in the history of humankind, and we're all learning about that as we go. So be prepared for a pretty steep learning curve. Be prepared to fail many times and to try things out and to be able to, do things differently, move to the next project, and yeah, be agile. Really be agile if you want that to keep going. And innovation also, I think, is going to be key. At the beginning, just like in digitalization, people don't really understand what it means, where they should go and what they should be doing and how it will affect that. So just be agile, just remain open to ideas coming from inside. Very often what I saw is that there's a lot of energy, knowledge, passion internally, which is not being harvested, and listen to your people. They know better most of the time. they really know better. And this is also where collective intelligence is all about, is this capacity to, you know, to think together in a much more efficient way than each of us individually.
And it's true, Bertrand. I think we are all on a collaborative learning journey, and I like this kind of notion. And I think this is what sticks with us, is to be passionate, to be agile, to be innovative. And with that, we are also optimistic, because I think you're really leading the way with this respect. And I hand over to Raphael to close this webinar.
No, many thanks, Julia, many thanks, Bertrand. Honestly, always too short, these sessions, but great learning, great takeaways. So a warm thank you to you, Bertrand, and Julia as well, for sharing impressive career path and generous tips. My key takeaway is what you were saying at the beginning, Bertrand, is sustainability should not be a burden, but basically reconcile business with sustainability. As well, thank you to all the participants and your great questions. I hope we covered the most. We wish you enjoyed this session, and we're looking forward to seeing you in our 2022 agenda. Until then, take the opportunity to wish you a good end of the year and a healthy end of the year to you all in this still difficult situation. Many thanks, Bertrand.
Thank you.
Good luck to Impact, to you and Sylvain, and thank you again, Julia.
Thank you so much for the invitation.
Speak soon. Bye.
Ciao.